All right, let's do some work with effects. Effects are all this stuff up here in the effects menu area. These are just the headings, and each one contains a bunch of different effects. So there's tons and tons of them. So let's create a composition, first of all, just our standard size. Composition, new comp, NTSC-D1, widescreen, square pixel, 5 seconds. Doesn't matter the background color. All right. So generally, when you create effects, they appear in the same area as the project area, and the two things are tabbed in together. So it's something that just will take a little sorting out to get used to. Let's bring a picture in here to work with. So I'm going to go File, Import File, and I think last time I gave you guys a folder of JPEGs. Really, any JPEG would be fine. I'm just going to use one of these frogs, drag it down here to my timeline area. Okay, and I'm going to scale it up a little bit. So that's S for scale, and just do that. So it's covering the whole background. Okay, so effects are typically applied right to the image, JPEG in this case, or to the footage layer, or sometimes, depending on the effect, you might want it to be above the layer, kind of like looking through at it, and that would be made on probably a solid layer. Okay, so there's different ways to do that. Let's try putting one right on the thing first. Okay, so normally when I'm looking for an effect, I just go up here to effect, and I usually remember what group what I'm looking for is in. So like, for example, we're going to start with blur and sharpen, and those are all right there, right? But you can also, some people tend to remember the name of the effect, but don't know what group it's in. I'm kind of like the opposite. I remember the groups, but I don't remember the exact name. So there's also a panel called Effects and Presets that you can search for an effect. And it's a typical panel like these over here, right on the right side, but it's not showing at the moment. You could go Window, that's where they all are, and there's Effects and Presets. Or we could go, let's do this, Windows Workspace, and we'll go to the Effects Workspace. What does that look like? So here's our Effects and Presets, and you can just type the name of the preset in this place, and it will come up. It's the same. I think we did text effects. We got there through the same panel, but I guess it was last week. So anyway, I'm going to use this here, and let's start with some blurring. So effect blur, and Gaussian blur is, if you use Photoshop at all, that's the most common blurring tool. There's some things that work a little bit faster. In After Effects, since you're applying the effects to often footage, and the speed of how it works sometimes matters. So this fast box blur is kind of similar to Gaussian. It's a little bit faster. So depending, every effect is kind of different, right? They're all, sometimes when you first apply the effect, it doesn't do anything immediate, right? You have to change some settings to see anything, and blur is that way. So here's my the controls for my blur and my fast box blur, and every effect has a different set of controls. Some of them are extremely long and complicated, and most of the time, if you're interested in it, you can just twiddle the dials and see what they do, or look it up online or something like that. I'm just gonna go through and kind of point out different sort of noteworthy effects to give you an idea of how they'll work. It would, if I went through and looked at every one and tried it out, it would take us the whole semester. So, so the fast box blur. Let's turn up the amount. That's the blur radius, and you can see it. It'll just blur right out into nothing, and or if I just want to make it a little bit blurry. All right, so that's the effect applied right to the JPEG layer. And if I want to temporarily turn off the effect but keep it, I just hit the FX thing right there. See, and it goes off and on. So if you want to like compare, maybe you're doing color correction or something like that, and you want to see if it looks better or not, you can just turn it off or on and judge that way. If you want to get rid of the effect altogether, just hit delete, okay? But remember, After Effects, it acts on whatever you last clicked on, if that makes sense. So here's Fast Watch. I should have chosen one I couldn't say. And it's applied to this layer, okay? If the last thing I click on is this layer and I hit delete, it's gonna just delete the whole layer effect and all, okay? So if you want to delete the effect, make sure you click there, okay? Now, when I just do Control Z all the time to undo, I probably won't always mention that. If you want to be able to see your project panel, it's tabbed in at the top here, and sometimes it's kind of confusing about like where what is, particularly because I have my layer that I've applied the effect to has a rather long name, Fantastic Expanded 4, which is partly why it's a little hard to see. But this right here says project, right? If I click on that, I can see my project panel, right? That's all the assets I imported. And if I click here, I can go back to my effects. Let's see. So I'm just going to delete that. Let's see what else we have in blur and sharpen. Effect, blur and sharpen. If you want to sharpen something, you can just, this is probably the simplest effect there is. I can just turn up the amount. Okay, eventually it gets ugly looking, but if you want to sharpen something, like in Photoshop, you normally use unsharp mask. Okay, it's actually the name sounds kind of weird. It actually does sharpen. It sounds like it unsharpens or something, but it's actually the name refers to a pre-digital technique for sharpening that they would do a darkroom maneuver where there would be kind of two panes of glass on top of the image, and it would blur along the edges wherever there was a contrasty edge to bring and increase the contrast of by blurring the two edges. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but that's why it's, and the unsharp mask kind of uses that same technique. Anyway, this has the same settings as it does in Photoshop, the amount and the radius. Okay, threshold you normally leave alone. You don't, the way it calculates that is pretty much fine for whatever you want. But the radius is how big the blurry area is, and the amount is how much it's sharpened. Okay, so long story short, you can turn the amount up pretty high, but if you turn the radius up too high, it gets nasty looking really fast. So usually you want to keep the radius down around 1, and the amount. People over sharpen stuff all the time. I mean, to me that looks pretty bad, but keep the amount down around. It can go up to like 100 or so, but the radius should be around, shouldn't get above 1. At least if you're trying to do make a photo or something or a piece of footage to look a little bit better, you want to have a kind of light hand with that. And one more there. Let's see, effect, blur and sharpen. How about radial blur? You can do it so it spins around, or you can change it to zoom, so you're zooming in. Okay. Now, almost everything in the effects are animatable, which is great. I mean, like, so, whenever you see these little stopwatches, that's an animatable quality, right? So I could animate this, and go into hyperspace or whatever. Let's do one on a layer on top of the frog. So let's go layer, new, solid. and it's going to be a solid layer. It should automatically be the size of your comp. Um, make comp sizes there. If it's not, it's possible that if the last thing you did was create a solid that was some odd size, it might remember that. Usually it comes up with that size. Anyway, okay, so there it is. Mine happens to be black, but that's fine. So let's try to go to noise and grain. So effect, noise and grain. And here you have a bunch of things that are just going to put noise on the layer. Okay, let's try this fractal noise because that's the most fun one. It doesn't look like much at the moment. It looks like clouds in Photoshop, actually. Okay. But let's make a few changes here. And there's, as you can see, these are like fun toys with lots of controls to twiddle with. If you like playing with software, effects are a dream. Let's see, dynamic progressive, yeah. So I made it dynamic progressive there. And see what brighten like that. Maybe turn it down a little bit. Looks kind of cool. Looks like lava or intestines or something. So I could, let's see what a complexity looks like. Not doing that much. So if I want to animate this thing, I could use evolution, right? So I'm going to step 1, turn on keyframing. Step 2, go to another point in time. Okay, so I went to the end, and I'm going to change this from 0 to 1. So it's a single 360 degrees. And then when I play it, that's cool. Okay, so we could have actually done this right on the frog layer, right? And it would have just replaced the frog. But now it's on a layer above it. And if we did want to, I could go to, say, T for transparency and make it so I can, have see the frog through it, or I could change my top layer to, say, multiply and just see the dark stuff. I don't know. None of those are really doing it for me, but that's soft light. That's kind of weird. Anyway, put that back to normal. Let's try stacking up more than one effect. So let's go to effect color correction. And let's try hue saturation. Okay. If you're just doing like and this is another thing that applies to Photoshop. If you're just doing like not really photo quality retouching, but you just want to make stuff look different, like in a creative way, you're making whatever it is you're making, you just want to make something brighter or darker or whatever, but it's not like you're a photographer where you're super concerned about maintaining fidelity and tonal range and stuff like that. The two most useful ones are probably hue saturation and brightness contrast. Okay, and hue saturation. Now, if I try to turn up the saturation or something, it's not going to do anything, because this one thing about hue saturation is you can't increase the saturation if there's no color there. And I happen to, it's not the greatest example, but I happen to have started with something that's just grayscale. So how can I make it more saturated if there's no color there at all? So fortunately, this effect has a colorized thing in it, right? So that means it tints the layer 1 color. And then I can increase the saturation if I want, maybe turn down the lightness a little bit. Looks pretty cool. Now, okay, so now you can see that we have 2 effects over in the effects panel. It can get a little confusing looking. You remember, you can go all the way, let's go over here on the left side and close them both, right? If you find yourself getting like it's just too much to deal with over here. And then just like open the one you want. All right, it's a little simpler to look at. Let's put another color tool on the fractal noise. So with hue saturation is the last thing I click on. I'm just going to hit delete, so I still have my fractal noise, but not the color correction. What was I going to put on there? Oh yeah, effect, another one in color correction. This one is fun to play with. You can see that there's a heck of a lot of, color correction tools in here. And if you're, this class isn't really about shooting video, but if you were into shooting video and editing together stuff, you might want to fine tune or enhance the quality of your raw footage. And that's a different way of doing things, more or less. I mean, you can do it with these controls, but I'm kind of just showing you more sort of like rough creative ways to do things to make stuff that's sort of not realistic, I guess you could say. Colorama. So this is fun. So Colorama is kind of complicated. It's all closed. All the parts are closed up at the moment. But let's see. Yeah. So if you'll see there's a input phase and output cycle, and the output cycle has a preset palette in it. That's really kind of fun to play with. This is Caribbean. Okay, and you can adjust all this stuff. This is just sort of presets. Here's fire and smoke. It's pretty cool. So that's a couple of color correction type things. Let's throw one more in here. I'm going to go effects, color correction, brightness contrast. Right. So the other one I mentioned. And if you just want to increase the contrast, here we go. And I can turn the brightness up or the brightness down. The hue saturation has a lightness one in it, but that's not as good as the brightness in brightness contrast. All right. Let's look at a few in generate. So I'm just going to click, I'm just going to delete these effects and keep my solid layer. Let's play with lightning, for example. Let's look at a few things under generate. Okay, so generate, all of these kind of like make a new thing. They make something, they generate something. So lightning is called advanced lightning. For some reason, I'm always looking for L on this, and I always forget it's advanced. All right, so lightning makes the the layer, it replaces the layer. Okay, so if you wanted to still see the frond, you wouldn't want to apply the layer to it. Although it does have a composite unoriginal, which will let you still see the layer. All right, so the lightning, there's different types, but they all have origin and direction. So right now I'm dragging around the origin thing. And then down here, this little thing is the direction. Okay, and as I move it, you may notice that the numbers change here when I move direction or origin, those numbers change. It's just X and Y coordinates. Now, one thing that you don't want to do when you're looking at these little doohickeys and moving them around, that is a common mistake, is you don't want to move your solid layer, okay? That's this thing in the middle, or really drag anywhere, okay? Because then you see the edges of the solid layer, and it's just kind of like messed up looking. People do that a lot as a mistake, so you want to be careful. if you do it, you can like if I do P for position, right? You just have to remember that the original numbers are 436 by 243, and you can always get, if you move back to them, you can always get back there. But chances are you don't know that number, so anyway, and there's different types of lightning, like two-way strike. We'll use a little bit later on when we do motion tracking to make lightning going between two mountain peaks. So it's like, Gandalf is fighting with the Dumbledore, or whoever two wizards are. Okay, so, or if you want to make it something like a mad scientist laboratory, this would be cool. And to animate the lightning, you could just move these things, or let's see, is it conductivity state? We'll just make it look like it's operating sort of. And there's all the, you can change the color of the glow on there. There's that purple color. I could make it, orange or something. Etc. All of these, looks like a lot of random terminology, but it all has a specific meaning. Let's get rid of lightning. Let's look at, these are also found under generate, but ways to make type like shine and stuff like that. Actually, I'm going to get rid of my solid layer. All right, and I'm going to put a big piece of type on here. So I go to my type tool, click once, and it's light sweep. And make yourself a big piece of type and make it, let's make it not black and not white, some color, and some, I'm using Arial black, but some that's big and bold. Okay, so we can see it doing its thing. Okay. So there's a few things we can do here. So let's try CC light sweep. So effect, and again, make your type big, okay? Effect, generate, and let's try CC light sweep, light rays, and light burst all might be kind of fun to play with here. All right, and so the center point, if you don't see the center point, like it's that little tiny thing right there, if it's hard to see, just up here in the effect, it says center. You just click on that and it should show you where it is. Okay, so see how I can get this nice thing to go across here. And it also makes like a beveled edge on the type. That's why you don't want to have white type, because I don't think you would see that. If I turn up the edge thickness, I can make that a little bit more obvious. Intensity. All right, so let's animate. This is the thing we're going to hand in. So let's animate the center going across. So I'm at home with my current time indicator. I'm going to move the center, right, all the way off here. So turn on keyframing for center. I'm going to go to the end of my animation, and I'm going to drag this thing across to there. And let's see how that works. That's pretty cool. Let's try another one. Effect, generate. Light rays or light burst. I forgot which one's which, so let's see how light rays looks. Yeah, it does a weird thing where it produces these cool rays, but it shows more inside of the type. If I turn the intensity way up, color from source, if I turn that off, it's more white. It's really cool, but it also tends to just stay inside the type. I'm going to delete that and let's try. I saw this light sweep effect. I forgot what it's doing. Generate and light burst. It blurs it out so much. Just seeing if I can do something with this that makes it look good with the effect that we just had. Yeah, I'm going to go back to the other one. Effect, generate, light rays. All right, I'm going to just do the same thing where I'm going to start here and turn on keyframing for intensity. Okay, go to the end and then move my thing over here like that. Let's see what that looks like with both of them together. That's kind of cool. All right. Let's put a drop shadow on here. Now we know how to do it with layer styles, right? Just going to hit home. But let's try a drop shadow on this type and see if we can do it with this other stuff on here. Okay. So effect, and this I believe is found under perspective and drop shadow. Okay. And we can just give a little bit more distance, maybe, so it's turn up the opacity. And it's got this hard edge. Let's make it soft. So it's a little bit blurred. That's cool. So we'll go on to do more effects, but this is something good to hand in right here. I mean, it can be any background picture and it can say whatever you want, but just render this thing out and hand it in, okay?